Right now and talk to a member of the Select Committee on Intelligence, Republican Senator James Lankford from Oklahoma. Senator, so good to have you here. I'm curious. We want you to give us your impression of what the President of the United States is saying, and I'm not being facetious here. We've been sorting through two topics: one, torture, and two, the Mexican tax or tariff. Let's start with torture. What is your understanding of what the president's position is on torture?
My understanding is he's released an executive order saying we need to review how we handle everything and to be able to make sure we're handling it in the right way and to see if everything's done. I don't see that as we're going to advance into torture. And quite frankly, as the United States, we put a stake in that past statute to say we're not going to do torture. We will lead the world morally, and we'll continue to do that. And we don't do torture no matter what, whether it's a black ops site somewhere else or whether it's in our Army field manual. We don't do it, and we're going to continue not to do that.
And what about the second issue? A lot of confusion yesterday exactly on what the president's position was on the tax. Is this a border-adjusted tax that the Republicans in the House have been talking about? And if so, do you support that?
Yeah, what I think he was talking about was a border adjustment tax. That's something that happens on multiple countries coming at us. For instance, China, I think, has a 17% border adjustment tax of our products going into China right now. Multiple other countries have that against us. We have just never done that to be able to balance it out. And so what the House has talked about for a while, and what was part of the conversation, even in the retreat time where the House was laying out their position on that, was to say, hey, this is something that's happened for a long time against us. We've never responded on that, and there may be a time to be able to do that. It was a surprise to me that they highlighted that and said this may be the way to pay for the border wall, because I hadn't seen that. I understand now the administration stepped back and said that's part of their buffet of options of how to be able to pay for the wall, but not necessarily the option.
So speaking of retreats, yesterday two of the most liberal members of the U.S. Senate spoke out during a visit to what is arguably the most pro-Trump state in the nation, West Virginia. In November, the president received 68.6% of the vote there, the most of any state, defeating Hillary Clinton by over 42 points. Democrats gathered in Shepherdstown, West Virginia, for a retreat that was closed to reporters. The state's Democratic Senator Joe Manchin hosted a seminar entitled Discussion with Trump Voters, according to a schedule obtained by Politico. And outside, Senators Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders stopped to speak with a group of anti-Trump protesters. Take a listen.
I don't have to tell anybody here that our country today faces enormous problems and that we have a delusional president who is way out of touch with the needs of the people of West Virginia and working people all over this country.
Wow.
So the question, Bill, is, and you've been following this for such a long time, I think it's great that they're actually in a state that Donald Trump almost got 70% in, and that is the real question. How do you adopt that 50-state strategy? How do Democrats get back those 1,000 state legislative seats they lost during the Obama administration?
That is the big question.
That really is a big question.
No.
And what's the big answer? Because it's still baffling.
Think about it. A couple of months ago, all of us were talking about how will the Republican Party rebuild? Will it survive after this election? Now we're talking about just the reverse. I think the Democratic Party needs a huge shakeup from top to bottom. And when you say a 50-state strategy, it's got to be, first of all, the leadership. Washington's got to be cleaned out in terms of leadership, a whole new generation of leadership, I believe. And the focus has got to be on the states and rebuilding on the states, every one of those states, particularly starting in the red states like West Virginia. And by the way, Rust Belt the working class states, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, which cost the election. I don't know whether that's going to happen, but that's what it's got to be. And there's a lot of resistance on the part of some establishment Democrats. Let me give you one example. Last Saturday, the Women's March on Washington, okay? I was there. Let me just say, emphatically, there were more people there on Saturday than there were there on Friday. There are 7 candidates for the new DNC chair. Were they in Washington? No.
Right.
6 out of 7 were in Miami talking to some big donors in Miami.
Right.
What message did that send? That we're the same old establishment party and not getting down to the grassroots.
And Deanna, that's the cover of Time magazine. It's all in the Women's March, but what Nancy Gibbs said on our show yesterday, it's leaderless.
Yeah, what's next? And you'll be reminded that it was in West Virginia where, for better or worse, Hillary Clinton showed authenticity when she went there and spoke with the coal miner, Bo Copley. And I talked to him after that, and that really resonated with him after words that she had said about wanting to eliminate the industry as a whole. And he approached her, what happens to our jobs? That was an authentic moment for
Actually,
Hillary.
it was one of her best moments in the entire campaign.
And yet she only got 26% of the vote in the state of West Virginia.
But she went.
Yes, she did go. Senator Lankford, let me ask you, I know you're a small government conservative. You mentioned ideas for paying for this wall. Do you just think generally, though, $15 billion on a barrier fence along the southern border is an effective use of taxpayer money?
Well, national security is an effective use of taxpayer money. Obviously, most of the area between Mexico and the United States already has some kind of physical barrier. This is not something new. And for individuals saying, gosh, are we going to build a wall? We're going to build a physical barrier. That's been done years ago. What we're talking about are the gaps in between.
Right.
Do we close in that gaps? And if so, how do we do that? So every country wants to focus in on national security. I would tell you, when I've been in Central America and I've visited with the leadership there, they all focus on their border security. And I would tell you, the folks in Central America are very concerned about the number of people coming through their country being transported by coyotes that are not Spanish speaking, that are coming from around the world and hitting in that same area. So while we talk about issues of security, this is one of the issues we have to talk about.
And Senator, on your list of security issues facing the U.S., where would you rank Mexico?
Where would I rank Mexico as an issue? I would rank everything, whether it's Canada, Mexico, or whether it's our borders, as an area we need to be able to secure. We've talked about this since the 9/11 Commission. How do we secure our ports to be able to make sure that we don't have materials moving into our port areas? And how do we make sure that we limit the flow of drugs and limit the flow of terrorism coming in? The vast majority of people coming from Mexico are coming for work. That's part of our immigration conversation we have to be able to fix our visa system. But we do legitimately have some individuals coming in for nefarious reasons. We've got to be able to find a way to be able to filter that out.
Bill Chris.
Senator, let me ask, would you be willing to take a gamble and put up $15 billion to whatever the cost is to pay for this wall on the promise that someday, somehow, some way, Mexico will reimburse us?
Well, I don't know what that's going to be. Quite frankly, I've heard that conversation as well. I'm still waiting to hear from the administration their final proposal. They're laying out different ideas a week into this and waiting to be able to see what the final proposal is. Quite frankly, this is something we started 15 years ago that the American people were paying for, border security. Ultimately, national security is not the responsibility of another nation. National security is the responsibility of our nation, just like it is for every other sovereign country.
So we're 1 week into the Trump presidency. A lot of us around the table and a lot of Americans are overwhelmed by the amount of news that's been coming out of the White House. What's your read on the first week of the 45th president's administration?
Yeah, it was interesting when I was coming on this program this morning, Joe. I thought there's no telling what you'll ask me because there are so many issues that are out there. I think, guys, you could start just about anywhere. I think the start for them is they're laying some things out. I heard the comment earlier on some of the executive orders is not accomplishing something and saying what we're going to do. That's true. Almost all those orders are saying start the process on these things. Start a 90-day review. Start a 60-day review. Let's start looking at how we're going to actually get this done. That's a typical executive order, by the way. To say we need to start this process, this is a new focus, or to say we're going to start enforcing this law that has not been enforced. He started by doing a lot of things that he said he was going to do, and he's working his way through that process one step at a time.
All right, Senator James Lankford, thank you so much. We really appreciate you being here, Senator.
What he said.